Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Bo Talifer and Eric Rasmussen. Episode 5, Tonal Context and Harmony.
Okay, should we record an episode now then about like how the basics of harmonic learning sequence work, and then we'll do like some of the yes nos and stuff.
How about we start with this? Right? Everybody knows this. So what tonality is that? So, right? So everybody would say that's major tonality. But the problem with that is I didn't change the melody at all. So if you everybody wants to hear, but I just changed.
Well, I put the 4 chord in. It's my soul.
You like.
It's like Soul Twinkle. 4 chord's my favorite chord. I mean, it's the best chord for sure.
And I always do. That's what Mozart did.
Okay, so there's he may have known what he was doing. I was listening to a lot of Mozart over the past week. I pretty much didn't listen to anything else. And man, you should listen to Glenn Gould playing Mozart. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
I'm an Alfred Brendel fan.
I'm not that familiar with Brendel.
Brendel playing Brahms especially.
Yep. Okay, so we got this problem of context. So what's the point we're trying to make? The point we're trying to make is that a melody can't give you objective context. I mean, it could pretty like strongly point to it. I mean, if you're using all 7 tones of the tonality, that still doesn't mean that you're in that tonality. And this confuses a lot of people related to this other discussion we're having.
Even once you've established the tonality and you make it clear, it's still not necessarily as specific as it is when you add the, harmonic function to it, add the chord to it, and it changes. It's like if I do, so we're in C major, everybody. Where does this belong? Well, I audiate that. Right?
Yeah, that's it.
Or it could be, everybody says, well, that's tonic. Well, could be.
Yeah, you could just keep walking down. It could be 6, it could be 4, it could be 2. Oh, that was nice. Whatever that was. That's 5 of 6, wasn't it? What was that?
What's right to be dominant? Well,
there's some.
Not if, not if you contextualize it harmonically differently. So that, what that is?
This actually opens a whole can of this opens a whole can of worms up. Yeah, that's
what is it?
You play that for a second. That sounds like Tetris. Dun, 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 dun. Sounds like Tetris what you played. This is why you need to use actual chord functions when you're teaching people to audiate harmony, because the tonal patterns, while obviously very good for people to learn how to sing, they could leave a lot to be, said.
Yeah. Do, mi, do. Re, G, re.
Yeah. Please
do, so, do.
Your ears before Eric confuses you.
Re, T, so. So, re, T. so, so fa re, do mi do. If those that are familiar with the jump right in, do mi do re ti re do re ti so re ti do mi so fa re do mi re so fa re do ti re fa mi do. And then
those are the tonal patterns from jump.
Those are the tonal patterns from jump right in. The instrumental series. Do so mi fa la do ti re so do mi do so la fa do ti so fa mi so do so fa la so ti do mi so do la ti so mi do. And then we go to minor. And you're supposed to audiate this all just tonic and dominant, but that's a problem.
Especially when I feel like it gets even further. The problem is further escalated when, if you're doing a tonal pattern that has two of the 3 or 4 tones, it's even more up for debate. That's also something I haven't seen in Gordon's sequence. Doesn't seem to offer guidance on how to audiate, other than the dominant, other 7ths or 9ths or 11ths or 13ths, which was one of the things that I wanted answers to, and realized that community didn't really have the answers I sought. Yeah, once my kids could all audiate, tonic dominant, subdominant, double dominant, triple dominant, dominant, submediant, all these things, and they knew tonal patterns that I gave them, and they could do at least 4 tonalities and do 3 functions in the other tonalities. What I would do is I would say, do, mi, do, here we are. Here's do, mi, do. And why can't that, you would say that's tonic, right? And I said, why can't that be? So, do you like this sound? Yeah. What? I just say, so functions can have extra tones in them. Mm-hmm. And that's all I say. So you can play a function or audiate a function and then add extra tones to it. And if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what that was my instructions to my, first, second graders. This thing that happens where once you get people to audiate a bunch of stuff, you can point out to them, if they haven't realized it already, that do, mi can be used in a bunch of different contexts, which is a really important insight to have, which you have to have after you can audiate it. Just knowing about that doesn't assist you. You need to do tonal patterns, and you need to be able to audiate tonality. But within that, there's also what function, because if you're in major, well, what's wrong with do, mi, do being part of a 6-chord? Nothing, right? Yeah. But it means something different here than it does here. Or do, mi, do, mi, do, do, mi, do, that sounds beautiful over the 5 of 6. Yeah. You get this augmented sound. I love that. Yeah, I always hear that as, whereas you're just playing dominant, and you got do, ti, la. Anytime you're doing this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it. It's just a dominant with it. But now we're in minor. Oh yeah. It's the same thing, except it's do, ti, la, but it's a dominant. You go into minor. So in minor, if you have do over the 5 chord, and then you put ti over the 1 chord, that happens so much. It's insane. Ti over the 1 chord? Yeah. So it's like a 9. Yeah, that resolution happens a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a lot where
You know, it's just
that chord, whatever. It sounds like this like melodic minor, like CIA meeting chord. Yeah.
And then I add, T.
But fee in, if you put fee in there too.
The fee? No. That?
Yeah. It's just a melodic minor scale, but if you use it, if you use that not as a pivot, just as like the main source, you get some really cool sounds out of that.
Sure.
That's actually the relative minor of, or it's like the related tonality of like Lydian dominant and some of those other crazy ones. Lydian dominant's actually really cool. It's got flat 7 and sharp 4. Yeah. Oh yeah, so I was further doing some experiments with I was getting people to label major, minor, just with a familiar song by listening to it, not by labeling tones, just by naming the tonality from hearing it in a familiar song. And I got quite a few people that can label major, minor, Aeolian, and Mixolydian with a bunch of like familiar folk tunes, like Mary Had a Little Lamb, those kind of things. But it's cool. It's great. And then I get them to quiz me, which instrumentally is so nice, because if you just teach them how to play the functions by rote, you can have them administer the partial synthesis to you, which seems to be really valuable for them to set up the test and see if you can do it too, because then they have to monitor if you can hear the right thing, and then we go back and forth. But it works really well. Yeah, I like that a lot. So Eric, I want to talk to you a little bit right now about the harmonic learning sequence that you kind of unearthed from the minds of your children over the years. So first off, the harmonic learning sequence, how would you define what this is? Like, why is this different than the standard tonality learning sequence? Or tonal learning sequence? What's different?
Because kids can do it as young as 2.5 or 3 years old. That's the first thing. It's easy. It shows you that they know that a song hasn't ended or not, or a song has ended or not.
So in the standard like tonal learning sequence, harmony is in there, but what are you doing that's different? Rather than
my kids don't have to be singing any tonal patterns at all to be a harmonic learning sequence. Later, it's very helpful, but they're at 2 and 3, 4 years old. They might not be ready for learning tonal patterns, but they're certainly ready to audiate harmony.
So what this points out to me, and I'd just like to say this, and then you can make some comments on this, but it sounds like what you're saying is that very young people can identify like the harmonic gestalt, or they can audiate harmony, or at least recognize the harmony in their listening audiation long before they're taught how to sing the individual tonal patterns and have those in their memory and yada, yada, yada.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've said is that the harmony gives rise to tonal patterns, not the other way around. Why did Gordon decide to do tonic and dominant patterns in major and minor initially, right?
Exactly.
Because why make that choice?
Which he has said in certain sources. Gordon would say that his ideas aren't meant as like a royal decree of how you should do this stuff. And he even said in a lot of places that depending on the culture or depending on the kind of music you're listening to, you might not actually want to start with 1/5. It's just the Western music culture has such a rich history of 1/5 being slammed into our minds that we start there.
It's the most objective one. If you had to put it on a scale, of what you can't get any more solid than 5/1 in major or minor.
Yeah. And I actually think that our love of this harmonic minor, even though it's not it's not a mode or a tonality that comes out of this, it's not a relative tonality of major. I think it flourishes in this Western culture because it's compared against major, and it compares against major so nicely. The 5 chord and the 4 chord, really have parallels. It's very easy to turn most songs in major into relative minor or parallel minor, whatever you want to do. Okay, so we have this ability to...
Yeah, any song.
We have this ability to recognize functions by listening. And so why don't you take us through, how do you first start this with people? So you used a familiar song.
I was trying to, this is the first week or probably the first week of class with a group of 5, 6-year-olds. And I wanted them, I was singing, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece is white as... All right, and it drove them crazy. And so some of them would yell snow. And I said, you can't say snow, because I don't do Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a... No, you got to sing it. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece is white as... And I give them another shot at it. And, some of the kids that were saying snow would then go, oh, you got to sing it. And I'm like, yeah, you got to use your singing voice to sing this special tone, because I can't go, fleece is white as... No, fleece is white as... no, fleece is white as... no, fleece is white as... And they would sing, snow. And I'm like, yeah, it's a special tone called a resting tone. And I was teaching them resting tone. Fleece is white as... But I caught myself harmonizing. Can you end there? And they said, no. And then I said, do you end here? Yes. And I was trying to get them to understand resting tone, but what I found myself doing was playing, can you end there? No.
And you were getting them to understand
here. Yes.
Yeah.
And then that eventually became, let's go on a hunt for where no one yes is. And I would play Wheels on the Bus, Go Talent Roadie, Itsy Bitsy Spider.
And so, you're just to clarify for people listening, you're calling yes. You teach kids that the yes chord is the chord that you can end on.
Yeah.
It's the function you can end the song on. And it should also be said at this stage, you're choosing songs that end on that chord. Because conceivably not all songs end on a tonic chord, but you're actually choosing a repertoire that does to highlight this.
I don't know how many children's songs don't. There's stuff that doesn't end on tonic. It ends on the dominant. I've got songs that I have them listen to that do that. Yeah. I've got some Gabrielli, and I've got this beautiful, it's called Butterfly Lovers. I forget who wrote it, but it's a Chinese beautiful thing, and at the end it goes on forever because it just sustains on the dominant.
Yeah, which actually, that drives some people crazy. I always remember one of my friends in high school, he could not stand tunes that either faded out volume-wise, so like he wanted closure to the tune, he didn't want it just repetitively playing in volume scooped, or if it ended on, the dominant chord, it would drive him nuts.
So I was trying to get them to understand that songs had a place to end on the resting tone. And I found myself playing tonic and dominant, accompanying what they're singing. And, we named it Yes, No. And eventually after singing all these songs that I said, London Bridge, Mary Had a Little Lamb, all the ones I said, not only do those songs have only yes and no in them, but they have exactly the same harmonic rhythm.
Totally.
So that's Mary Had a Little Lamb, London Bridge, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Go Tell Aunt Rhody, Little Bunny Foo Foo. It's like
a bunch of these also have the same motif rhythmic structure too, like London Bridge, which I pointed out to you, which we won't go down this, but it's very fascinating actually. Yeah. Itsy Bitsy Spider doesn't. So it has Itsy Bitsy Spider is really interesting because it has the same harmonic rhythm as London Bridge and Mary Had a Little Lamb, but doesn't have the same like melodic motif, like rhythmic structure. But London Bridge and Mary Had a Little Lamb are the same friggin' song. Same with Mary Had a Little Lamb and Hall of the Mountain King are literally the same song. They have the same melodic like motif structure. Really interesting.
So after learning, that the tonic and dominant happen at the same time in all those songs, I said, this is getting boring, isn't it? It's like, let's find one where it's not happening the same way. And
can I back you up for a sec? I want to ask, why is it so important to only start with 2 functions? Why don't you just start quizzing them with songs that have 3 or 4? Like, what is the absolute necessity? Because it really, I think, is important. Because when you're asking them, is this yes or no? It makes it a lot easier to identify, basically to choose between these 2 options. And I have you tried to do more than other tunes at first and see it fail?
I don't know why you would.
Yeah.
Unless you're testing for genius right away. If they get it right away, then you can add a third pretty quickly. I've had kids do 4 functions in major in less than 10 minutes.
That's wild, eh?
Because what you do is you tired of no yes, no yes, no yes, right? You get tired of that. No. Yes.
I hear this 4-chord coming.
No. And then they think this is funny. They think that's hilarious. I don't know why, but that makes sense.
It is funny. Mozart's doing this in so many of his pieces. It's really funny.
And is this yes, no, or something different? And it sticks out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
I said, uh-oh. We have a new one. It's not yes, it's not no.
So there's something in here, though, that I think a lot of people might not realize how practical what you're doing could be for all kinds of musicians, not just people learning, to get their functions together. But what if you were going to learn some kind of absurd new function that you'd never encountered, like a tritone substitution or something really ridiculous? I mean, I've used the same principles. You play 2 things that are really similar next to each other over and over and over again, and you make that new thing, just like you just did with the 4-chord, just stand out like a sore thumb. It's just boom.
Yep.
It really works.
Yeah, and then you do all kinds of songs that have the 4-chord in them. And I do all kinds of other songs in major that just have tonic and dominant, but the harmonic rhythm is different.
Mm-hmm.
Like a song like All Day, All Night, Marianne, down by the seashore, sifting sand. Boys and girls join in the band, down by the seashore, Marianne. So they start to learn and feel the harmonic changes to that song and move their bodies to, dum, bum, 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 bye, dum, for all the previous songs, and then bum, 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 bum. You start to feel when those changes occur, which gives you a better...
There's a really important, there's 2, I think, really important points. Like, one, you're talking about, 2 levels of feeling the changes. Like, one is with body movement. So you're associating the kids. I'm watching Eric, so everyone's going to be listening to this, but Eric's really encouraging people to move their bodies in association when the changes are happening rhythmically. So this makes it even more obvious. But I think there's another context here, is that it's in the context of a song. And it's so easy for this to fly over people's heads, because if this stuff is not done in the context of a song, it really will not provide the musical benefit that it's actually meant to provide. Because there are people that can identify 1 and 5 when played in isolation right next to each other. But if you can't audiate it within a tune, like, for example, if you just played why don't you play Mary Had a Little Lamb for us once with the melody and then once with only the function. So first time melody and function, second time just. And then, so we'll do it one more time here. We'll do functions and melody and then functions. But this time, while he's playing the functions, make sure, can you actually hear Mary Had a Little Lamb in your mind while he's playing just the functions?
And that's what I do to my kids. I go, Mary had a little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. So they have to do.
To phase it out.
No, or, little lamb. They have to do that. And then do the whole thing. What song is that? And some smart kid will say, hey, that's Itsy Bitsy Spider or Wheels on the Bus.
Or the smarter kid will be like, we actually don't have enough information to make that decision yet.
That's my first grader when I was playing tonic chord. This, I said, what is that? And he says, we don't know until we put the other functions around it.
Oh, that's really cool, which is an insight I don't even think a lot of people are having when they exit university for, performance degree.
Yeah, D minor chord is not D minor chord is not a D minor chord. There's so many.
It's actually.
So anyway, so you do yes, no, you do a bunch of songs.
So why don't you do yes, no with us? Do the basics of it. So kind of quiz us on yes, no in Mary Had a
Little Lamb. Oh, yes. You remember that's no, and that's yes, and no can be anywhere, and yes can be anywhere. So, do I end here? Or do I end here? Do I end here? No. Do I end here? Yes. Now you got to be careful because I'm also teaching my kids. And that's an ending sound.
Yeah, because in that song,
now we're in the blues, in the context of the blues. But you change that, so that G7 chord changes its quality when you make it a solid context of a 5.
It's also important, I just want to point out too, that you use different voicings, and I think it's really smart to do that, because if you were to not use certain voicings, you could introduce this misrule that this specific voicing is what I mean by the no chord. Yeah. Or this specific, which is, I think, kind of what happens when people start learning tonal patterns and they don't know enough of them. Like, you don't know enough tonic tonal patterns. You might think that's only do to mi is a tonic pattern.
It becomes an extra problem when you're doing tonal patterns in Lydian, because you could hear as a, and you hear that as major.
I think so. I totally agree with you. Yeah,
and you could when you're doing tonal patterns, but if you're doing functions in Lydian, it doesn't have to be major as long as you're avoiding, as long as you're avoiding that.
I always hear that progression that people are being faked out with for 1 to big 2, major 1 to big 2, or Lydian 1 to 2. I hear that as like an unfinished like Aeolian cadence. So it sounds like it's gonna go flat 6, flat 7, 1.
I'd say you just don't know enough really hardcore only Lydian tunes. Like really solid.
I'm forgetting, there's a Fleetwood Mac song that has that. It keeps going F to G, but the song is in A minor. And there's never an A minor chord in the song. But it's clearly not Lydian, because the way that she's phrasing the melody, she's always landing on the tonic tone, but not the tonic function ever.
Things get subjective. But so anyway, so that's yes, no. And then you get tired of all those songs that do that. And then I can either introduce a new function or go remind them of the songs that they already know that are minor.
I always wondered about that. If you prefer to, so you got 1 and 5 in major down. Do you prefer to go to subdominant major or do like minor now with 1, 5, like at the same time?
It depends on whether my kids have enough, oral with songs in minor. The problem is they don't have a lot of vocabulary in minor songs.
Yeah, because I'm mainly an instrumental teacher, and I always just show them how to. I've talked to you about this a lot. It's so easy to show someone how to play something in parallel minor.
Yeah.
And it seems absurd to not do it, especially if they don't have a minor listening vocabulary, because all these tunes are very easily, for most people, picked up when you show them the minor version. They can start calling it minor within a minute or two.
Shortcut to discover for themselves something, to play around. You're giving them an extra kind of block that they didn't have before to play with.
Yeah, and your work actually inspired me. The way that you do yes/no with functions, I think you can teach people what a tonality is before they can label individual tones too. And you do it through familiar songs. And you've even tried the stuff that I'm talking about.
Is this the right way or the wrong way to play?
It's surprising though, because I have a bunch of students between 7, 8, 9 that within usually a week or two they can start to get 3 and couple of them 4 different tonalities off one familiar song. And just by doing the same yes/no sequencing, start with only 2, then a third, back off the third if they're getting it wrong too much. Yeah, it's harder to do that.
The same comparisons you're talking about do.
Yeah, you make comparisons.
You have one and something that's not that. And then you have a third one. So you have the 1, 2, and then that's not 1 or 2, it's something else.
Yeah. And I'll introduce Mixolydian after major and minor, and then I'll mainly compare Mixolydian to major a bunch. I'll keep playing. And at some point, because they can't use the melody to answer the question, so they just have to say, they might not even be at the point where they really can give you much of a sophisticated answer, but they know it's different. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on what their listening vocabulary is.
So yeah, and then you do 1, 4, 1, 4, 5, or tonic and dominant and minor. Then we just start doing songs that they already know. Twinkle being one of the harder ones, because there's
It is actually, yeah.
There is a lot of movement to it. What's a lot easier is and I'll have them sing what I'm saying, in a rhythm.
Or sorry, start on the 4. I actually really like the pattern of how the harmony moves in that song. It's so cool.
Yeah, and you find out that on top of spaghetti's the same as ting-a-lay-yo, come little donkey come, ting-a-lay-yo, come little donkey come. Top spaghetti covered with cheese, lost my poor meatball, somebody sneezed, ting-a-lay-yo, come little donkey come. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. So
one of the ideas that I think a lot of people miss out on when they don't study harmonic patterns, like we were talking before, that a bunch of these 1/5 songs have the exact same harmonic rhythm, and it's probably because certain ones sound better than others, and that one just naturally percolates up. But this idea of studying the harmonic form of a song, it becomes very useful for composing and doing exploration and creativity. Do those functions again, but put another chord where the 5 chord is. So anything, you put anything you want. And then in my mind, if you now hear that compared to now do the original one and then that one like right next to each other a bunch of times. It seems to really bring this thing up. Why don't you put something kind of freaky in there? Put like a tritone sub of 5. Put like flat 2.
Sorry.
For me though, this is such a logical way to start hearing new functions, because normally those tritone subs are a nightmare for people. But if you put it just in the context of something very simple that you can already audiate, the change and the behavior of that new function, it kind of just like,
change only one thing, and then that thing stands out. If it's, if you have to always find a minor song, sometimes it's better once the kids have had enough time, with it being in the correct or the proper or the original tonality, just, what song is this?
Yeah.
And they say, it sounds like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Is it Mary Had a Little Lamb, or is it something different?
I usually go, it sounds like Mary Had a Little Vampire Bat.
Yeah, well, they immediately say that, and I've gotten used to this now, like that they have been offering up, because I never teach, that minor is sad or minor is scary.
Sure. Yeah,
I never teach that, but they all have watched enough movies, and when there's something scary or something sad, that tonality is used, and they have that association already to it, because that's what's used in the culture of
exactly. When I do yes no with tonalities in major and minor, I won't try not to prompt them on what minor sounds like. Like I won't say it sounds like sad or whatever.
Yeah.
Really high percentage of my students say it sounds spooky, and I don't know why. I never use the word spooky.
Yeah.
And then later, I just teach them that, okay, is this the regular Mary Had a Little Lamb, or is this the spooky one? I just use the word that they said.
Whatever.
And then
yeah.
And then maybe after 1 or 2 of those weeks, I teach them that, we actually, musicians use the word minor when you hear spooky. And then you have to nuance that a bit once you start teaching them Aeolian, because they start.
I teach them, before I teach them major minor, I teach them resting tone do and resting tone la, because that gives them access to all the other tonalities. As well, what about T? What resting tone la, the other la, or resting tone so. And I tell them there's 2 resting tone las, and they kind of get over that pretty quick. Resting tone re. Sure. They can say, can I hear that in resting tone re? They can explore these things. And sometimes I put all the resting tones up on the board, and they, I'll pick a song, or pick a resting tone, and I'll play a song in that resting tone.
Yep.
And then we'll cross it off, and we'll explore all the tonalities that way. If they're ready for it, but sometimes I just do that to give them the listening vocabulary.
You said something else earlier that I want to touch on too, that I don't even think, you said, when you're doing this with your kids, and I know you're mostly teaching this to very young kids, which is one of the things that makes it so interesting and amazing. But I wouldn't resign yourself to this is only a kid thing. This is what all musicians should be up to when they're doing harmony, because you take the example of a jazz student in university. Maybe they played a little bit in the jazz band. Now they're first year freshmen in university. They're in over their heads. Like they don't know what's going to come at them harmonically with this degree. But in my view, giving someone at that developmental level who can't properly audiate 1 and 5 and 4 on their instrument very well, maybe some, but a lot of them can't. I know that. Giving them a tune like Autumn Leaves to solo over, it's basically, I think, borderline neglectful, because there's so many changes in that tune.
Yeah.
To ask someone to do that before they can even audiate like 1 and 5, it's almost just cruel.
Yeah, there's a couple key changes for sure, and some of the chords are a little outside. It's
got a full blown smorgasbord of every function in major and minor. It's like it's absurd to ask someone to intelligently improvise over that. I'm not talking about just make up melodies, but to do something harmonically interesting over that tune. It's inappropriate to give somebody that like early on.
Yeah. So yeah, simple stuff. Change nothing but one part of it.
Which is just a good idea across the board for teaching. This ability, like if you're trying to show something to your students, whether or not you're an instrumental teacher or like early childhood teacher, even if you're teaching like very advanced students with aptitudes off the yin yang, if you change the one thing you're trying to highlight, they're still going to learn it faster, whether their aptitude's higher or not. It's still just reducing the complexity. If you're trying to transmit something, it just makes it apparent what you're doing.
Yeah. So if they know a few minor songs, then they know Mary Had a Little Lamb shouldn't sound that way. And so if they can tell that's the right way or the wrong way to do Mary Had a Little Lamb, what they already understand after we've done the yes-no game with all those songs in major is they already know what it's going to be like, and all they have to it's the same exact harmonic structure that it's easy for them to everything's the same except that tonality. So the tonality is the thing that stands out. So I do
exactly.
All night to Marianne, down by the seashore sitting. They already can tell you when the change is going to happen because they know that's the exact same song as we did before, and all I've done was ended on resting tone la. And after a while, you start using resting tone do and la for the names of tonalities. We do learn the real, once they're able to tell me that's resting tone do, that's resting tone la, they're ready to name the tonality. So it's easier to call it resting tone do and la because it gives them access to the other resting tones. Yeah,
this is where it's interesting to do this with instrumental students because like out of pragmatic reasons for teaching someone to play something by rote, I found that parallel minor makes so much sense because most of what they're doing is retained, and it's so easy to change. Like Mary Had a Little Lamb, you can do most of that song with 3 notes, and to change from parallel major to minor, it's one note essentially that's changing, and that is easier to teach someone than showing them the relative minor version. But then very early on, you can get into these issues of why is this called resting tone la and resting tone do? It's the same damn C note on the piano, and then this whole Pandora's box of pitch letters opens up, which
Well, one of the things I've done, and this might be a reiteration of something that comes up later or before this episode.
When Eric means might, he means exactly what we're
right? So I want you to remember this tone. This is our resting tone. I want you to remember that tone. Okay, you got it? This is our resting tone. Is that different or same as the one I played before? And a 4-year-old will say it's different.
Yeah, because they're auditing the context and telling you that tone sounds different in context.
And some kids will look at it and see I'm playing the same note.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And although I am playing D, that it's different for a 4-year-old. So,
which is the whole reason for using different labels for different resting tones, because auditionally it's easier to label it that way. Because think about it, to do the opposite, you would actually have to teach them to identify the tonality with the other tones in the tonality, which takes a lot more time. That's how I learned to do it, though. So it's very odd for me.
Yeah, you don't need as much vocabulary to do it this way.
So the students that I have that I've taught parallel major and parallel minor with by rote on the piano, after I do yes no with tonalities and say is this major or minor, it's very interesting if you don't teach them the name of the resting tone. So I'm teaching them to play Mary Had a Little Lamb in C and C minor. The answer they give you is that the E note turns into an E flat note. That's how they tell you the tonality changed. If you don't teach them the label of the resting tone. And you can just give them that quiz through sound too. You can say, hey kids, C is my resting tone. How do you know if I'm major or minor? They will tell you it's E flat. But
when you're playing an instrument, you need to name your notes eventually, much sooner than you do singing, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't Yeah, I don't get into that as much because my kids are usually not old enough
And by no means am I. In this segment, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use movable do with a law-based minor. I'm not saying that.
No, and I'm not saying they shouldn't use names of notes. Another thing I do, is this the right way or the wrong way, right? I'll also say, do you want me to, what do you want me to use? Do you want me to use, Mary Had a Little Lamb's resting tone, or do you want me to play Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho's resting tone? What do you want? Now, I'm making them audiate across songs, whether they share the same tonality. So I say, okay, what song do you want to do? And they say song. And I say, do you want me, which resting tone do you want me to use? Before that, I'll say, do you want me to use for this song, or do you want me to use which resting tone? And I'll do it in reverse order. Do you want me to use this or this one? And that gives them a chance to just say that one, the one at the end, or right, or so they don't get. So I ask them, and then and after that, I'll say, do you want me to use the resting tone for Mary Had a Little Lamb or Joshua? And then another thing that I'll do is, all right, now you want me to use resting tone do or resting tone la?
Yeah, so you start with the most concrete example. Like, I will play two for you. Do you want this one or that one? Then we know it's from a song. Yeah. Now we know it's called.
Before that, the right way, wrong way. Just tell me you want me to do it the right way or the wrong way, and then I'll play it and say pick one. Right. Yeah. And then what happens eventually, which is really cool, right way, wrong way, and eventually you're saying, you want me to play that in major or minor?
Yeah.
And they're playing the same game, just with different vocabulary. But it gives the learning, it gives them the learning and the teaching over to them. And it's also a good assessment to find out where they are, because they're not sure. Or you also find out kids really have a hard time with it being played wrong.
I've noticed that some kids are more open to it being played wrong, and some want it, like it should, air quote, be.
I find higher tonal aptitude kids prefer wrongness.
This would probably explain my proclivity when I was younger to play everything, in as many tonalities that I could get away with, plus the ones that,
that gives it over to the student a little bit.
So you do notice that there's a correlation between high tonal aptitude and their interest in meddling with changing the tonality.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
It tickles their ear, right? Yeah. I had a kid just on Tuesday. He's a little older, but he's only had me for a few weeks. He already understands major, minor, tonic, dominant. I've only had him three classes. I don't use the terms yet, but he hears them solid. He's completely solid in that in 3 weeks. And he's 8 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know how old he is actually. But
it's funny, before I started actually hearing about you and Gordon and stuff, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was teaching, because I've been in this world for 3 years now, this MLT world. But before that, I always used to teach everyone to play stuff in minor all the time, and I'm wondering if my students were doing well just because I would always make them play stuff in different tonalities. And beginning method books, like standard teaching books, typically there are typically no songs in minor and no songs in triple. They're almost totally major duple.
They're hard to come by relative. Yeah. So eventually what happens is the kid will say, oh, I want to do Butterbeat. And Butterbeat's a song that I teach that's Dorian. And the kid says, do you want major or minor? Right? And I play it in major and it's wrong. And then they say, oh, it's minor. And then I play it minor and they squint and they're like, that's not right either. And it's like, oh no, there's more than major and minor.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get a new tonality. I said, oh, you've discovered a new one. because it's not major, it's not minor. You guys know major and minor. Depends on the sequence of what I'm doing, because you could introduce resting tone, do, re, mi, all the different resting tones, and they have, then they have a larger palette of paints.
This is also important to point out, though, that even if you're taking people through the harmonic sequence and like, say, for example, your students know 1-5 in major and in minor, and they can give you all the terms. This is law, this is minor, this is 1, this is 5, yes, no. You're still teaching them how to sing songs in other tonalities. You're not necessarily, yeah. So they're still getting all that listening vocabulary in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All the sequence gets woven in across and through everything else that you're doing, especially expressive movement for me. Is the biggest missing just about anywhere. Great music, and and then of course, lots of repertoire, lots of meters.
Yeah.
And once they have those down, I start to double down on stuff that changes meters, stuff that changes tonalities.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of just those basic like folk tunes in like 5 and 7.
Yeah, but I'll do the same sequence kind of with meters. Oh, do you want me to play Mary Had a Little Lamb and moving in 2s or moving in 3s?
Mm-hmm.
I can do both.
Mm-hmm.
Back and forth, I can do both, and it depends on the thing at the same time. Where you got. I'll switch it,
Yeah.
And I just play it that way, and then I say, okay, you want it 2s, 3s, and eventually they pick a song that doesn't move in 2s, doesn't move in 3s, doesn't move in both. It's like, no, that's wrong, and they discover BB ants. Big beats are not the same size as when I got lazy and I didn't want to spell out big beats are not the same size, all the letters of that. I just put up BB ants, and it became a thing. So BB ants, big beats are not the same size, is the best descriptor for unusual meter or asymmetrical meter or uneven meter. Everybody has all these, there's a lot of conversation about what's the best one. And I'm like, the best one is the ones that the 3 and 4-year-olds can understand.
100%.
Big beats are not the same size is as clear as can be what it is. And I don't like saying it because it's a long phrase, so just BB ants. BBANTSS.
Yeah,
and it's also funny because it sounds like baby ants, Kids love that. And I draw a big toe on the board, and I draw a little ant. It's like, this is a baby ant.
Yeah.
And then they remember that because of some kid came to me like 5 years after my class. It's like,
wow,
I just remember the toe.
I mean, that's what mnemonics are, right? Anything that helps you memorize something. It's not just some kind of alliterative
trick.
They really do matter.
It works that way. The more things you have to remember.
Well, I remember Da Capo from my band teacher, like hitting his head like very softly. Okay, let's. I want to take a break just for 1 second. Then I have one more thing I want to ask you about this before we wrap this one up. Just give me 1 second. We can cut this out. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk to you about with this whole harmonic learning sequence thing, and it's kind of related to what I brought up before about some of the issues people have when studying jazz, where it's like all of a sudden there's like 20 functions in the song, or it's hard to even find many jazz tunes. Just like simple blues has 3, right? Mm-hmm. And jazz blues usually it's at least a lot more than that.
Yeah, you got the turnaround at least.
But what I wanted to bring out is that, like, so your book has this your book is a curriculum that's been sequenced and designed from your experience to actually push people through this in a doable way. But by doable I mean some kids are auditing like 4 functions in a week or 10 minutes. It's absurd. But this is where I see there's a problem in I teach instrumental, and I want to teach songs that the kids, usually I teach, people from 7 to 15. That's like my biggest age range because they're instrumental students. Mm-hmm. I like teaching songs that kids listen to. I encourage them to make playlists and stuff because if I know they're listening to the songs, they're going to learn them better than just a pre-cooked method book that I use. But the problem with a lot of the pop or modern repertoire is that it's really difficult to find songs that people are listening to that only have like 1 and 5 or only have like a couple functions. Most songs that people are into don't have that many functions because of the pop music scene, but there still are a lot of functions, and like things like Aeolian is really popular right now. We were talking to our friend and another amazing teacher, Ron. What's his last name?
Malanga.
Hopefully we get him on. But like that is an issue, and I'm wondering, I don't know, I'm just wondering to hear more about your thoughts with that. Like because kind of what I've done to compensate for that is I just teach a lot of songs by rote, and then when a song comes up that is at the appropriate level for them to actually start labeling the function or knowing what it is, then I'll just take the opportunity to do that. But if they're not at that point, just learning more songs. We're just learning how to play the melodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong if you base what you're doing on what they already have in their listening vocabulary in terms of, the songs on the radio and whatnot. The issue with some of those songs that they're a little nebulous at times, and so that doesn't make it...
Well, Ron's term for that was like floating Aeolian.
Yeah.
So it's like in major, it's like 1, 4, 6, or no, sorry, 1, 5, 6, 4, or any combination of those 4 chords. You could hear that as major, or like, major with a switch to minor, or Aeolian with a 3. Yeah. Like, there's so many ways to hear that.
You look at guitartabs.com or whatever it is, where, I want to learn to play this song. And I look at it and I see D minor, G7, C, D minor, F, G, C, and then D, and you go, well, that could be Mixolydian, that could be Dorian, that could be major, maybe not minor. If it is, it might be D Dorian, depending on the quality of the G. The G chord could be major or minor. Then it becomes a little more obvious. But you take those chords, you don't know what tonality it is by just looking at the changes. You have to listen to the melody and like that, and take it into a deeper context than just what is the tonality? And oftentimes you could have the tonality be subjective. In other words, you and I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's in that tonality.
And you can even learn to just switch it at will in your own mind. Like you can learn to hear functions differently just by choosing to, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's like my Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. How do you want to audiate that? You can audiate it and
That is one of the reasons I found that when you're trying to get someone to audiate Aeolian or Mixolydian, when you compare it to, like if you do Mixolydian, Mary Had a Little Lamb, or Mixolydian, or I've been doing Aeolian, versions of these too. It actually makes it easier to kind of, you can be more certain that what they're audiating is not going to go off into some subjective, realm, if it's something that's more pinned down like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the problem with Mary Had a Little Lamb in Aeolian is that you don't necessarily, you
got to use 1 and you got to use minor 5.
You don't know if it is Aeolian because it doesn't have
No, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it.
You don't have a 4 chord, so you could be audiating Dorian.
You could for sure.
Are you audiating? Yeah. Or there's no 4 chord in it, so we don't know whether it's, so it's that wandering Aeolian. Sorry, because there's no 4 chord to tell you that it's Aeolian.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I mean you could sneak it in somehow, but if you're not highlighting it, then it's not truly.
It's not in
I
there.
agree with you.
You don't know if it's Aeolian or Dorian. That's it's dependent on three functions, Aeolian and Dorian. That's the problem with a lot of the Aeolian songs. They swim around in that soup, but it's not as concrete as major minor is. So I would tend,
Well, that's actually a really good point, because major minor, you can teach someone to audiate functions with a smaller amount of functions.
So
you only need.
Dominant. You don't need the 4-chord in major and minor.
I mean, you could do this with Mixolydian. You can get away with it too, because there's nothing else that's going to have major 1 minor 5 or major 1 major flat 7. I call it flat 7, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
but 7. But there's nothing else that's going to have
subtonic, tonic, subtonic.
Yeah.
When you say flat 7, I think of a G chord with a flat 7. You know, like the added tone. The tone that's being added is this flat 7 instead of a.
Yeah, we'll get into that. My preference for
fa so. Fa is the root for subtonic. So is the root for tonic.
Probably one of the best. I was playing some stuff for Mixolydian once for a teenager, and I was teaching to audiate, these different tonalities. And I was just playing Mixolydian, like improv. It's like, what does this sound like? Like, if this was in a movie, tell me what would be happening. And she was like, I don't know, some kind of like peaceful, like forest elf community. So it's interesting. She's probably playing some kind of video game with like Mixolydian things in it.
Who knows where it comes from?
Actually, video games and film music are a really good source for naturally occurring in the wild tonalities. That's where I think I just lucked out, because I was playing so much video game music when I was younger. You get kind of pushed into, you get a listening vocabulary for this stuff, which is something, you're not hearing a lot of this stuff on the radio. Like, there's not a lot of Locrian on the radio, mind you.
I don't think there's Locrian anywhere except.
Eric doesn't teach Locrian, so hopefully Adam Gordon hasn't risen from the grave yet. But I do think Locrian is one of those ones that does come alive, but I don't know many people that can actually make it come alive. Like, are you familiar with Frank Gambale?
No.
The guitarist? He's the guitarist on Chick Corea's Electric album.
Oh, really?
Amazing guitarist. Yeah, but you should hear this guy.
Band? The electric band.
Yeah. You should hear this guy play over Locrian. He makes it sound like, no one else does. It's an actual tonality when he plays over it. When I hear most people do it, it's just nonsense. I made a Locrian blues that actually works really well. Oh no, it's not Locrian blues. I took the harmonic form of Mary Had a Little Lamb. So this 1-1-5-1, and you can make modal progressions out of that work really well. So go T T Fa T in Locrian.
I can't do it. I hear it. I heard the 4-chord though in it. It's.
Oh yeah.
That tune that I'm singing. Yeah. I can't. I can't audiate, but I heard the 4-chord. And it's Aeolian. I need a.
Yeah, that's great.
I need a.
Oh yeah, he's got the pitch bend on that album. I have that on my iTunes. I used to listen to that a lot. Yeah, it sounds like an Aeolian blues.
I can't. Tweet.
Okay.
I don't use it. So we better stop there.
That's kind of an overview about what the harmonic learning sequence is and how it works. Hopefully the end of that is not too unbearable. But that's kind of an overview of what the harmonic learning sequence is. how it's actually unrolled, and some of the techniques that Eric actually uses to get stuff moving.
Yep, and the kids can do it.
Here's maybe a final question for you based on this.
They can do
that. This will open up a whole nother can of worms. What would the likelihood of you? What's the likelihood of you being able to do this if you don't have a chordal instrument with you?
Oh, impossible.
You would basically need to use a choir as a stand-in for a piano, which there's no reason to have to do that.
Yeah, you'd need 20 kids who are solid on their, tonal understanding.
Wait a sec. So, Eric, hold on. You're making this groundbreaking claim that using chordal instruments helps people hear harmony better?
I don't know how else you do that.
No, I just poked some fun at that because that's kind of in the standard, in the standard or the capital MLT formula. A lot of people seem to be resistant to using chordal instruments in the learning process.
It doesn't help children sing if you're always accompanying them.
For sure.
So I say do both and take away the chords. Don't always play the chords.
But it would be the same as like when I'm teaching instrumentally, my students know at any time I might ask them to actually sing what they're playing. And you just do that enough and they learn to audiate what they play really fast because they're like, I don't like that feeling of not being able to sing it when he calls on me.
Sing with yourself while you're playing and then stop playing and sing. And then you get the transition easier because you're copying yourself.
I've been marketing it as you want to learn to sing what you play and imagine it physically so that when you're at school and not paying attention, you can actually practice your instrument. And that's a lot better than using your video game time when you're at home. And it's a pretty good sell.
I screwed up my fingers so bad. Long workshop where I was doing exactly that. I was doing this.
Yeah.
And I was learning stuff and boy, did I have it down. And then I got home, put it on my trumpet and my fingers were just god awful. It was the wrong muscle memory. Yeah,
that can screw you up for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, but point taken for sure. Yeah. No disagreements. You got to do both. How are children exposed to harmony haphazardly through, right? There's no sequencing. So you got to make it more concrete for them to get a latch, onto it.
Mm-hmm.
Make it easier for them. And the way to make it easy is to do what I'm doing. Try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the testament to its power is like, this isn't like one kid that you've had. You can do this with any kids that walk into your classroom. Some learn faster than others, for sure, which makes total sense.
Some don't get 3 functions in a year.
Some won't?
No.
Yep.
Not to the point where I can give it to them, just tell me tonic, dominant, subdominant. They've had enough experience with all these songs. Which
makes total sense because if the harmonic aptitude is actually a thing, if we look at rhythm aptitude, there are some kids that'll, get division. They'll get duple divisions in like 5 minutes.
It absolutely is a thing, and I've shown it in my research with kids that are 2.5, 3, 4 years old, that have had my sequencing, either just orally, or kids even older who've had my sequencing don't necessarily perform well on this when I can give the same test, call it a test, the game. It's a 3-minute game, and I've got kids that I've never taught that score high on the test.
So there's actually some kind of aptitude at play because if they're kids you haven't trained, there's no reason they should have the ability to do that task so rapidly.
Right. But on the other hand, I train them and they do get better. Right? So
yeah.
Harmonic aptitude is a really weird animal, especially when you get above 7, 8 years old for the harmonic improvisation readiness record, which is, listen to this, listen to this. Same or not same?
My experience so far reflects yours that, once in a while, I usually have students 7 to kind of 15, but I do often get younger students because they're referred to me because I like teaching younger students and I know how to do this stuff. Not as well as you, just because of the volume that you've had. But I have noticed the younger they are, the faster they learn the functions in general, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I haven't taught enough of the older kids, say 9, 10 and older, to tell you that that they can learn this.
To be honest, I think the biggest problem that I've had with older kids developing this is the resistance to using songs that only have 1 and 5. That's like a very serious problem.
Yeah, no,
because they're not in
I don't have repertoire for kids that are, 3rd, 4th grade. They have to learn my baby songs. And I say they're not baby songs if you don't understand them. So that's about
There's a very odd thing about the folk repertoire, or just a nursery rhyme repertoire, whatever you want to call it, is that once someone can audiate, they seem to enjoy it, no matter how old they are. That's the funny thing. It's usually when people that can't actually play it, they think it's kind of boring. But once they can actually play a bit, especially when their harmony, mind comes online a bit, they tend to like it. This is Eric's yeah. This is Stravinsky had a little laugh.
And then just don't ever move that down. Don't move this down.
Yeah, that's
because then you lose the flavor of chordal harmony. Anyway, all right, we've flown off.
I think we did pretty good. We stayed relatively within the bumpers.